Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Great Resignation, which we hope does not happen. But, the media is getting some nice buzzwords out of it. So as people are ramping on here, first of all, welcome. When we were planning this back in the spring and it looked like, oh, good, COVID's behind us. We were really looking forward to having everybody back in our offices. And then, this has been the season of adapt and overcome. If nothing else, COVID has taught all of us as business owners and just people in general how to adapt and overcome. So a couple ground rules. And so we've already got almost 50 people on here, which is awesome, which that would have been a packed room with tables in the community room at BGW, high atop the BGW studios. So anyway, welcome to we're just really glad to have you here. Welcome. So I'm going to just introduce real quickly, but I want each of our panelists to introduce themselves. But here are a couple ground rules. And I use rules lightly because a lot of you guys are type A's. So, I can't corral you anyway. First of all, you can harass us on the chat. That is a place where you can harass us, and I'll be monitoring that. Questions and answers, hit the Q&A. That's what that Q&A is all about. I will be monitoring that for the panel. We've got some questions as well, but we want this to be as real time as possible. Alissa has a challenge. She is having to hold down the fort for Patty and Amy of AccruePartners because they are in South Africa. Liz, pay attention. They're in your home country. And so Alissa is doing double duty. She's doing this, but she's also running the company for them. And she's got to do some stuff. So she'll probably bow out here. But anyway, enjoy the ride. Wish we could see you guys in person, but hopefully that'll happen soon. So Jeni, wearing the branded t-shirt of Haven. Jeni Bukolt, I want you to, after I'll introduce each of you, then I want you guys to go around, all right? And then just tell a little bit about your company, what you do, et cetera. Chuck Cooper with Whitewater Consulting, good to have you here. Alissa Farrow with AccruePartners, filling some massively big shoes for both Patty and Amy, and then Nick Gallo of Complianceline. All right, so Jeni, and people aren't probably going to see you unless you're talking. So Jeni, go ahead and give us a little intro about what you guys do, why this topic is of importance to you, et cetera.
Sure. Well, good morning, and thank you for having me here today. This is actually my favorite topic to talk about, so I'm really excited. Haven is a community branding organization. Essentially, we help you develop, design, and deploy strategic marketing and communications campaigns to align your teams internally to build community inside your organization, but also to share your message externally to build community around your brand. So I firmly believe without community, you can't be successful. So very excited to talk about that.
Awesome. Yeah, your attitude towards culture is positively infectious. So that's why you're on here, Jeni. Chuck, give us a little bit of background.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Chuck Cooper with Whitewater Consulting, and it is an absolute pleasure to be here today. Our company works with small and mid-sized companies really throughout the U.S., and it's been really interesting over the last 18 months. The way that the direction that the company has gone, we are really focused a great deal right now on helping to be able to serve and to support our small and mid-sized clients in the areas with everything that has to do with people. So everything from the talent acquisition and retention, all the way through the company culture and HR compliance. So anything that is really people related is really where we are able to bring expertise to and really help support our clients. So it's a fascinating time to be in the space.
Yeah. Alissa.
Yes, thank you. And thank you so much for having me. My name is Alissa Farrow. I'm with AccruePartners, and as Gary mentioned, I oversee a lot of our operations within the organization and have been here 10 years. And so certainly, I echo what Jeni and Chuck said. It's a really interesting time right now. I've been doing this for a while, and it's, I'm seeing clients and I'm candidates. It's just an ever evolving, changing by the month hiring landscape. And so it's just top of mind and the conversation we're continuing to have. So love being here and continuing to talk about it.
Great. Thanks, Alissa. Nick.
Hey, I'm Nick Gallo. I'm Chief Servant of Complianceline, and we are a company that provides a suite of corporate integrity products to companies of all sizes. I'm really passionate about culture. I'm really passionate about making our workplaces better. I really want the workspaces that my daughters and my nieces grow up into to be better than that which my mom had to live through in the 90s. So part of that is creating cultures of inclusivity that help not only to reinforce the bottom line, but also help to unlock the magic that people have within them. So really excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me, and excited to dive into this new topic du jour, the Great Resignation.
Yeah, and the whole reason we're doing this is to hopefully stem that into your company so that we don't have people resigning. And a lot of, it's funny. I heard somebody say people don't leave companies, they leave bosses.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's something about that. And there's something about culture too. This is not just some fuzzy thing for HR to deal with. This is heartbeat differentiator, quite frankly. It's quite frankly why I'm at BGW. I love our place. It's not perfect. There is no perfect place this side of heaven. So just be aware, but we can make this better. So here's some of the reasons that we're hearing people are quitting. All right. Well, first of all, the stress of the last 18 months of all the ambiguity, all the uncertainty, the tragedies, quite frankly. I mean, I have one of my best friends died. He was, number 60, I think, in Charlotte to die from COVID. I mean, it's awful. And I've got plenty of friends that have gotten really sick and are just fine now, but the whole thing is just tenuous. Plus, we've had a very politically charged at least 18 months or more. And so we've got a lot of things that are weighing in beyond just the workplace, I think. So, but we've got commutes, are we coming back to the office now? Are we not? We've got work overload. I know that we at BGW, we went into lockdown in the middle of busy season, and it's been basically 2 years of solid busy season for all of us. We've been logging plenty of hours. Yeah, granted, I can just walk upstairs, but it seems like the work doesn't ever end. During PPP, I was answering emails at 1:30 in the morning of people trying to get, their funding from the banks before the doors shut. Really tough. Lacking a sense of meaning, and then also other aspects of life. I mean, a lot of you guys have had to juggle kids at home, bandwidth issues, computers, kids breaking down because they don't get to be with their friends. I mean, all of these things. And then, you go into lack of recognition and lack of appreciation. I just launched a poll a couple days ago about, the Sunday night dreads of, why are people applying online, or why are they looking for other jobs? And out of 42,000 people that had weighed in on, looked at that poll, I think it was 77% or something. It was a pretty high percentage. Now that I think about it, it's 64, I think, was lack of appreciation, feel underappreciated. Interesting. So I'm going to start with the first question to you guys, and we'll start kind of the way that we went. You guys can, Jeni, Chuck, Alissa, Nick, kind of in that order. And then if you don't have anything to weigh in, that's fine. But knowing all of you, I'm not worried about that. So the first question is how can we as business owners show our employees that they matter, that the work they do matters, and that the company cares about them as human beings? So Jeni, I'll let you kick us off on that.
Cut me off if I ramble because I'm really passionate about this. I think we have to realize as leaders that people come to work. You know, you're not having your same A player every single day, and we have to be empathetic to what's happening in their personal lives. And a lot of that in our organization is about having this Maven mindset, making sure you're other oriented, you're listening to what is going on in their lives, you're having these radically candid conversations so that you're uncovering issues early on, frequent touch points, and all of that helps to have them feel like they're seen, heard, valued, and you're overcoming challenges together as a team. So it's really important to us to have these conversations regularly to make them feel like they're valued.
Chuck, what are you seeing?
So I think, when we look at, essentially what happened 18 months ago when the pandemic hit, this is one of the moments in history where everyone in the world, at least, if you want to boil everything down, everybody within our company was impacted by COVID. And just the way that our lives were turned upside down when we went to shelter in place. So it's kind of like Jeni said, we've all been impacted in unique ways. So as we are bringing people back, I think it's really important. And we talk to business owners every day that they're trying to understand and trying to figure out what is the best way to bring their people back. And I think what we've really got to focus on is as we've gone through the last 18 months, people have just struggled with really having a lot of their own internal needs met. And when I talk about that, we're talking about really just a connection with people. And so I think that we have to bring the human aspect back into our leadership and back into our company to where we are really listening to our employees, getting to know, how they were impacted. And then also, really trying to understand what it is that's going to help make them feel safe as they come back to work. I think that everything that, all of the processes and the ways that we have approached business over the last several decades has really changed. And so we've got to be sensitive to that. And we've got to be ready to kind of reimagine what we want our future to be and start to make that transition.
Good points. Alissa, one thing that a lot of our viewers and listeners here may not know about AccruePartners is what you guys do. And so what I'd like you to talk about briefly is what you guys do, because that sheds some interesting perspective on what you're saying as well.
Yeah, and I realized that about halfway through my intro, I never spoke to what AccruePartners does. So we're a talent solutions firm. So we're in staffing and search. And so we work with clients to match talent within their organization on the contract, direct hire, or SOW space. And so we're seeing it from both sides. And, I can really align with what Jeni was saying when I'm thinking about internal employees. It's all about building trust early on. If I think about 18 months ago, we had to quickly, have care and compassion and have a level of understanding of people's personal lives. Like all of a sudden, people that you're interacting with in an office setting, now you get literally a peek into their home when they're on video. And so acknowledging that and doing the recognition of the little things. And when we're talking to our clients too, we're hearing some of that, or people that aren't having great feedback with recognition and stuff. It's probably that extra level of care or spending time outside of a weekly one-on-one to understand the individual and what their needs, how their needs have changed in the last 18 months to make sure that they're adapting to the person, because it's certainly not one size fits all anymore.
Yeah, that's good. Nick, what about you?
I just think this is like the biggest opportunity that we have as leaders to differentiate ourselves and differentiate the our teammates' experience by getting this right. And I think, Jeni, on your introduction, you said something like, we need to bring the humanity back to this, and we need to treat people like human beings. So first of all, I think it's like cutting people a little bit of slack, meeting them where they're at to some degree, but also, what have we as leaders done to, articulate a I don't know, for lack of a better term, like a romantic purpose or a romantic mission that we can tie our day-to-day actions to, and show people how what they're doing every single day fits into this broader mission. We're going to see a massive separation of companies over the next 10 years as millennials and Gen Zs, which now occupy about 50% of the workforce, ascend to 75% and ascend to higher positions of power within the organizations. The organizations that get it right and can authentically allow these, that can authentically sort of create opportunities to, again, unlock that magic in the workforce, are going to just accelerate faster. And this is not, millennials and Gen Zs aren't these like weird, these weird snowflakes. We just have a different prioritization of what matters. Our grandparents would, put their nose to the grindstone and work for 50 years and get the gold watch and, get the pension and all that stuff. We saw so many things. We saw 9/11 and we saw the Great Recession and we saw COVID, and all these different things caused a reprioritization of what matters, and that purpose piece matters, and us having work that is resonant with our own purpose and us making a difference in the world. It's not like the other generations didn't care about this. These things, though, are just higher up on the hierarchy. So, treating them like human beings, understanding that life is a lot more like baseball than it is like brain surgery. Like, you can strike out 2 out of 3 times and still make the major leagues. Cutting people a little bit of slack as we go through this thing, and understand that we're not, painting a photorealistic painting, but we're doing a lot. Life is a lot more like a mosaic, and that gives a lot more room for the messiness of life, for the messy background, like Alissa said. When we're looking in somebody's home. And we see the disaster that's behind them. Well, we all have a disaster in our homes, and cutting people slack on that stuff, I think, goes a long way for people to not be like driven by fear, but instead driven by their passion, or driven by something that they're actually going to run at with, an authentic effort,
I've got to jump in because I'm so excited that you said that, Nick, because that's exactly what I always say is we want to go to work for a purpose, not for just the paycheck. I think, people always say, well, just give them more money, they'll stay. No, it's not about money. It's like coming to work and knowing what I did made a difference and it has an impact in the world in some way. So going back and figuring out what is the why that connects your team with the company's purpose and why, and it's a good fit. And you know what? We don't have to worry so much about retaining, because sometimes the right people shouldn't be on our team. They might be on someone else's team because their purpose and why fits somewhere else, but looking at like, what is that true thing that will help build this community? Because everyone has this intrinsic need to want to belong somewhere, which is why I believe community is so important in an organization, which you can only have if you have that communication, that one-on-one, discussions.
Yeah, but yes, correct. We're going to vibe big time today. I got a feeling, but it's a bizarre thing because no leader is ever going to say, I don't care about people. People are automatons. People are labor units. No one's going to actually say that. And yet people in those organizations feel this dissonance between those words and the actions or the environment that they live in.
So logos on a wall or values on a wall, and it's not really there. It's not authentic.
Exactly.
Totally agree. Yeah.
So, and I think, bringing that authenticity into the conversation and letting, again, being a human, talking to another human, not this like leader that's, I have it all together and, I'm walking around with a scepter or worse, a riding crop. And we all know that perfection, while like unattainable, is still noble to pursue. A genuine effort to close that gap, to Jeni's point, between those words on the wall and the experience that we're living out, and bringing people into that process can do so much to reinforce this culture of humanity, reinforce a resonant culture that people want to be a part of. Again, compensation is not just dollars. Incentives are not just dollars. There's a bunch of intangible things that are hard for some people to sort of quantify and put into the equation. But many times those intangible things are the glue, or, are the things that actually increase the thread count in the tapestry that is your culture.
Yep.
So I'm going to interject here. Everybody that's listening and watching this thing, I put in the chat 3 links. So this is not necessarily by design, but what's interesting is Jeni, Nick, and AccruePartners, so Patty and Amy, their stories were on the Anything But Typical podcast. And so I've got links to each one of their podcasts, because you're going to get some additional color, and you'll understand that this is not like we brought these guys into this, as well as Chuck. So Chuck, you're going to have to get onto our podcast too. But obviously this bubbles up from within each of them and their organizations, which is cool. And again, it's not perfect. I mean, you will not find that. We are all flawed human beings, and we've all seen that in our Zooms where the camera fell off, or we couldn't get it to connect, or we were like frozen in like, whatever. But here's a you guys hit a point that I want to drive in deeper. So depending on where you are, I've got neighbors across my little drive here that are Wells Fargo. They aren't going back until I don't know when, but they keep pushing it back. Bank of America over here, and then other business owners, 3 business owners, and they've been in the weeds. They've never missed a day. They were all essential service people owning businesses. So you got this variety of things, but how do you deal with the isolation and communicate appropriately with the isolation that is going on for people that have the option or that have had to work remotely, et cetera? So Jeni, let's kind of round robin again. I want to hear what's worked and what hasn't worked, quite frankly, on the communication front with your teams.
Communicating with teams. Yeah, we're in and out of multiple different types of organizations. So I feel like I could share different perspectives. Some of our manufacturing clients had to go back in the office, of course, like you're saying, they had to be in there. So even if some employees weren't comfortable, they had to have those conversations like, what will make you feel comfortable when you do come back to work, and making sure that we're kind of meeting where they are. And there's no one size fits all approach in that. For our organization, we are pretty much remote. We do have some in-person meetings. So it's important for us to have regular communication. We're a creative agency. We need to talk. You can't be creative in your own 4 walls. So we're always on Google Chat. We're checking in constantly. We're throwing memes in the chat, and we're having these offsite lunch meetings, and just to make sure we can still keep that camaraderie going. It's a really important part of our organization. And then we've seen other people that are fully virtual in other states across the country, and they're making sure that they're doing more regular check-ins and just having more frequent touch points, I feel like is really important when you're virtual. But what it also has done is made us streamline our communications. Before, you yell over your shoulder for someone to help you, and now you realize, well, how do I explain this over email? So it's actually streamlined our handoffs, and I think made us a little bit more productive, I would say.
Yeah, that's good. Chuck, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I think that when it comes to the the connectivity and the community that we're trying to keep together, I think the one thing that I've seen from business owners that has really been able to advance and really keep their organization together and doing it well is, as we went through this last year, is we saw CEOs creating videos and communications that they were sending out to their teams on a regular basis, in some cases every day. And I think that's where, as an individual and as employees, we were looking just for some guidance and some reassurance that, that our leadership team has got their arms around what's happening. And again, as to what, Jeni and Nick were talking about earlier, they were communicating with authenticity and really being transparent on what was going on and kind of what some of the challenges that they were having personally as well, going through those times. So I think it comes back to having a communication strategy to keep your team connected. And then as we look at organizations, that are scattered throughout the U.S., we're finding ways to really identify things that are important to me. Maybe it is a TV show, or maybe it's some type of a sporting event where we're building community that can really get together to check in with each other and to talk about. Maybe we're in at the end of the baseball season, so we're focused on who's our favorite team. And I've also seen other organizations that are doing, a lot of the virtual tastings, which has really been a big success for companies as well. So I think we've become more innovative in how we communicate and how we are trying to build community. I think that when I look at the business owners that I talk to, I think it's really interesting because when I'm talking to the younger and when I'm comparing them against my age, they've done a really good job in most cases of keeping and building community. Whereas others that are, again, in my age and above, we've been challenged with that. So I think there's so much that we can learn from the millennials and the Gen Z that's coming into the workforce right now. And again, from a CEO perspective, keeping that building community, it's actually asking questions and getting to know those people and understanding what really is that impacts them and what motivates them, so we can build that into our team and our DNA as we go forward.
Chuck, I appreciate that plug for community in organizations.
Yeah,
I think it's critically important as we go forward. And again, depending on the generation, there's a generation gap in some cases that some people are fully on board with that. So, and I support it.
yeah, that's a great point. Alissa, what are you seeing?
I think transparency is key, regardless, acknowledging if there's any unknowns, or if you don't know, the timeline to return to office, or the landscape and everything is changing week to week, month to month. And so there's a trust that's built off of just saying, hey, we're working on that, and we don't know, because if you don't communicate that, it leaves, or have any sort of touch point, it leaves this unknown and questions and uncertainty. And that's when people start to pick their head up and be like, oh, this company doesn't, know what's happening or going on. They're not communicating with me. And that's when they start to look and maybe think that there's other companies that could do a better job of doing that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Alissa, you mentioned something a couple of times. So you mentioned the word trust. And I think that's something that, as I'm talking with leadership teams right now, this is something that I continue to hear over and over as we're working remote. Sometimes there's a lack of trust between the employer and the employee. And I think that is a major gap that we have got to figure out a way to close and build back that relationship. And it comes back to simply the employer and the employee coming together to start to communicate and to start to really build a personal relationship. Because if we can't trust the people that we have on our teams, I struggle with trying to understand why is it that we have those people on our team if we can't trust them. And oftentimes it's on our shoulders as a leader. It's our responsibility to go back and to build that relationship back with our people.
Yeah, that's
well, and
really
also,
good.
yeah, very good.
Go ahead, Nick.
Well, I was just going to say that, this whole trust thing is also, it's not kind of in a vacuum, right? Like there's so much labor mobility. So people come into your organization with some kind of baggage and some kind of preconceptions about whether they can trust an organization and whatever. And I think it's on us as leaders to continually try to overcome that. And there's a really good question here by someone. I don't know if did you see this question,
yeah.
everybody?
I'll get to it.
Okay, fine.
I'll get to it.
Okay, well, fine. But yeah, I guess my answer would be to just kind of lighten up a little bit. That might be my answer for everything. But we've tried to make some of our meetings, spend a little bit, 15 minutes, just everybody kind of talking about what's going on in their lives, especially for my teams that are totally remote. And it's not going to replace what being in the office and the camaraderie that sort of organically comes from those, interactions as you cross people in the halls. It's never going to replace that synthetically, but it's at least something, you know what I'm saying? But it's hard. It's hard to get right. And I think it's going to continue to change as this whole thing continues to evolve and we continue to move through it,
Yeah. So we've got some good questions that are coming up here, and then I'll throw these out and then let each of you guys kind of ping pong on what resonates with you, et cetera. And don't feel compelled, but if you don't have a point of view, that's fine. But one thing that I will add as far as communication, and you guys hit this, first of all, the whole notion of trust, it's a two-way street. We also have, I've seen, and not necessarily here, but we work with enough business owners that I know enough stories that, if somebody's doing day trading and, binge watching Netflix on your dime and their productivity is in the tank, well, guess what? They're probably not all that trustworthy. They're probably not the right one for your organization.
Right.
But as leaders, we do have to model that. But from a communication standpoint, you guys hit on the frequency of communication and also bringing some fun into it, right? And it's not just that, hey, it's, it's a virtual wine tasting or whatever. But we do need to have some fun because, we're all under pressure. This is, none of us have been through this before. Last time anything remotely happened was the Spanish flu in 1908 or whenever it was. So, and they didn't have webinars, thank goodness, for Zoom. But one thing that we've used is a thing called Standout 2.0. It's not the be all end all, but it's literally a 1 to 5 minute check-in every month or every week. You can get it through ADP. You don't have to be an ADP client, but it's really powerful. And it just facilitates the discussion of what did you love this week? What did you loathe this week? What do you need from me as your supervisor? Here are my priorities. And I mean, it's like 6 questions. It's an amazing tool. So I'll just give that plug, and there's nothing in it for me. We don't get a dime for, pushing it, but it's been a really helpful thing. So here's the question. So Brent, good to see you here, man. So here's the situation. I could do better at understanding each person better and showing appreciation, but in the past, I've allowed myself to be taken advantage of and almost held hostage by overvaluing employees. I came to realize that everybody is replaceable if needed, and life will go on if they leave. But how do you balance these two views to appreciate and the appropriate amount? Great question.
Love this question. So I've battled with this myself, Brent, and I had a big issue with this like earlier in the year. Anyways, the conclusion I've landed at is, why do you value employees so much? Is it for them to like you? Are you doing it to get something from them? Or are you doing it because this is the type of organization that I'm going to run, or this is the type of team I'm going to run, irrespective of who's on it, I'm going to value them. And if it's going to be that kind of others focus and you're giving to give, not giving to get, so to speak, I think it makes it a little bit easier to kind of reconcile these issues when you otherwise would feel like really betrayed by somebody that you've poured into and gone to bat for. Also, I think the other side of it is you need to have that yin and yang, right? You have to have that sweet and salty, or however you want to say it. You want to be loving, but you also have to have those clear lines of what's in bounds, what's out of bounds, and what values actually matter and which ones don't. If it's this laissez-faire thing and everybody just loves each other and there's no teeth behind the smile, so to speak, then you're going to run into these issues where someone is going to be sort of violating implicit values, and you're going to be kind of taking it in the teeth. So I think it's kind of like, if you were a pastor of a church or something, you probably want everyone to feel super welcome. And a lot of these people are probably not going to be there 2 or 3 years later, but you don't want to be the type of leader that's going to be like, an extended tryout, prove it, and then I'll love you. You just have to be able to like pour it out, but also you need to have a kind of a healthy pouring out of it, because otherwise you're just going to get jaded. And I think that's the risk. That's the risk people who really value people run when they don't have that countervailing sort of force or that countervailing, point in the equation to rectify situations that, allow us to not get taken advantage of.
Yeah, that's good.
Another thing I would add to that, and I think that's a great answer, Nick. You hit on so many of the key points. I think that as we're looking at either from a leader perspective or manager perspective, trying to make sure that we have that balance. I think a lot of times we have to really go back to the values that we have as an organization, and really, as we're even measuring our relationships we have based on what those values really are. And it really comes back to, do we have them just set up on the wall, or are we actually living those out day to day? And I think that, when it comes to performance reviews and comes to people, I think oftentimes the measuring stick should be, again, just what are the values of our company, and live those out day by day.
100%. Gary, I want to backtrack for one quick second, because you mentioned something that worked well in your organization. I forgot I wanted to share this with some other leaders on the call, because I think it changed how we our culture remote. We do a daily huddle, but we've added in one of the headlines in the huddle is a daily gratitude. And it completely shifted all of our team's perspective on where we were, because, during the pandemic, everything is horrible and you're stressed out and whatever. And so some of those days to find one thing you're grateful for was really difficult. But as we started sharing, we're breaking down barriers and understanding each other and what they see that's valuable for the day, what's going on in their lives. And for us, it really helped, again, keep those frequent touch points to build community, to have more of that camaraderie, and then just the more gratitude you practice, the more you see, right? So it was really helpful for us. And I believe every organization, communication is always the problem, either lack of, miscommunication, no communication, whatever. So when it comes to even getting taken advantage of by employees, I think if we're communicating with them, setting clear expectations, and hopefully, like to Nick's point, we're not necessarily in it for our return, for us to feel good about ourselves, but more to have being a strong leader, and giving them what they need to succeed.
Man, that is some really good stuff. And if
there are
for
gems
anybody,
in this, there are gems in this webinar, man.
I know, I know.
Oh, we can answer Dana's question too. If I think.
Oh yeah, we're getting to it. We're getting to it.
Or
Dana,
values.
Yeah, but you hit on an important point, and if you follow scaling up kind of methodology of meetings or EOS with reading the book Traction, an L10 meeting starts with what they call a segue. I always insist on anybody that I'm coaching, we do it with a gratitude, with a give me a win, tell me something good. And it's not just about rainbows and unicorns, but there is something that happens in our minds when and it doesn't it doesn't eliminate the fact that we're going through difficult times. It doesn't eliminate the fact that we've got difficult things going on at home or wherever. It's not a head in the sand ostrich approach, but it is what are we going to focus on? Are we going to magnify all the crap, or are we going to magnify something good in the middle of the crap? So
I'm glad you mentioned that too, Gary. It's like toxic positivity is also really not good, to pretend like issues aren't there or don't exist. You're not having good conversations and overcoming challenges as a team either. So having fun isn't about ignoring the hard stuff too.
Toxic positivity. I've never heard that term.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah, that's really good. So Brent, excellent question. Thank you for that. But I do think that there are some really wonderful nuggets that came out of this one. And if you want additional clarity, then hit us up again. Dana. So this is a great question.
Yeah.
How do we work with and motivate employees who now have a different work ethic than they did before COVID? They were great employees, and now we're starting to see some issues. We're a small company, and I can really see the changes in some of our employees. Great question.
Oh, Dana, can I? In typical EO fashion, I can experience share. Dana, I have a small organization too. COVID hit, we all went remote, and one of my A players at the time completely changed. I didn't know what was going on, and I was struggling to try to reorganize and shift priorities and make it work. And I want to throw out there that having a culture isn't just about taking care of people. It's also about taking care of your clients and your projects too. You have to be able to perform. So if the person on your team is all of a sudden not performing and not aligning with your core values, as were mentioned earlier, what you need to deliver on at the end of the day, they might not be a fit anymore. The people that got you here are not going to be the people that get you there. So you really have to take a hard look at, well, does this person still align with my organization? Ultimately, we decided that this employee didn't. And actually, she's flourishing now in her own business, which is fantastic. We both made out, so you have to take a hard look at what's happening there, in my opinion.
Man, that's good. That's some really good advice. Anything that Chuck or Nick, you would add to that?
I don't know. I think at some level it's like incentives, right? There was some incentive in place, whether it was coming into the office and the natural controls that brought, or the camaraderie that went along with it. There was some element in this sort of multi-factor equation that determined this person's performance that has changed. So can you synthetically recreate that through new goals, new, bonuses and incentives or something like that? Or is it something like Jeni was talking about where this new setup is just never going to work for somebody, right? Like some people can't work from home. I'm kind of one of those people. Like I'm not as productive and things like that. So, if it's not going to work anymore, if the tires that are on the car can't get you through the mud that you're in now, then you got to change those tires, to Jeni's point. But I would probably first look at connecting what's going on. I'm sure they feel like it's not happening, and then subsequently look at are there incentive changes that we can make, interaction points that we can sort of tweak a little bit to see if we can get some purchase with those tires.
Ooh, dicey question just came in.
I saw that. Oh boy.
It's interesting because this is our 81st week of a weekly webinar with Jack Santaniello and Adam Boatsman that we started before it was even called the CARES Act, and then the CARES Act, and then PPP and EIDL and blah, blah, blah. I mean, thank God for the changing and shifting sands of the government, because otherwise we wouldn't have anything to talk about, evidently. But this one has been dicey. And a lot of people are freaking out what to do, because not only is this subject of vaccines really polarizing,
Mm-hmm.
It's scary for some, and it's like, if you don't do it, you're killing my mom or whatever. I mean, it's just really, really difficult, and there's going to be a lot of litigious stuff going on. The attorneys are going to make out like banshees on this thing, and Jack has even kind of said that, and he's not a litigator, but Jack Santaniello is Shoemaker. But the last 2 or 3 webinars that we've done, we're doing another one tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock. So whoever asks this question, an attorney will be on here. So he'll give you his opinion, as he calls it, the Jack theory, because he's also an attorney and he doesn't want to get in trouble. But here's the question. We're subject to the new federal contractor vaccine mandate. Any advice for how to talk to employees that refuse to comply? Who wants to take that hot potato?
I'll take it.
All right, go for it.
I mean, I think you just have to decide how you want to handle it, right? If it's a binary decision for you, then you have to let that person put their money where their mouth is, or put their scruples where their mouth is, and, draw the line in the sand and see where the chips fall. That's what I think. I mean, what are you going to do, right? I mean, you're not going to hold them down and give it to them. We're not at that point yet.
Right.
So
we've also
Jack Santaniello's on here. He's
aside from communicating with them, we've also seen organizations, because they can't enforce it, how do you, I've seen incentives for getting vaccines. I've also seen an organization where they have lapel pins to show who's vaccinated, who's not, going back to how do you bring employees back and make them feel comfortable, so people know who might be vaccinated or not and who they want to be masked around. It is such a touchy subject, but to Nick's point, I think if that's the protocol and you have to comply, then I don't know how much flex you have there.
what do those pins look like? Are they little gold stars or something?
Isn't that a little bit weird? Yeah.
Yeah, it's very weird.
It was not my idea. I'm just saying.
We're just sharing ideas. We're just kicking it
throwing out
around.
there what I saw. Well, yeah.
Yeah. So a unique perspective, and one of the reasons I put all 3 of the podcast links in here, but Nick and his brother Gio, their grandparents came over here from Cuba. So they've got a very unique perspective on the blessing of free enterprise and that sort of thing. So it's just interesting. Again, what we don't need is more polarization.
Correct.
Right. Yes.
What we don't need that, because guess what? You and I are not the enemy.
Correct.
Somebody that's stoking the fire of trying to get to be divided, that's probably the enemy.
That's
so right. And fear is never a good taskmaster. It's a
Correct.
wicked taskmaster. So I think this is pushing all of us to have a little bit more grace with one another, authenticity, and be able to be Yeah, I mean, we can have different opinions. You know, my wife and I have been married 38 years, and believe me, we've got plenty of different opinions.
Well, you should. And that in an organization, diversity is what leads to creativity. Difference of opinion.
Of course it
great
is.
ideas. Like you need that. Yeah.
Of course it is. But you must have respect for those that have different opinions.
That's right.
And it's when we get into echo chambers that we get into real trouble. You know, so enough about that. Man, this has been, we had some good questions.
We did it. We danced right on that line, and I think we did it. We made it out, guys. That was great.
All right, so here's another question. So we've conducted in BGW some stay interviews in the past to ask our team why they stay with our firm. And that's been interesting for us. I mean, we have been very blessed in that we've got a very, very low turnover in spite of, you know, pre-COVID and even during COVID. Now, do we take that for granted? I would hope not. We certainly don't want that. But is, you know, these kind of stay interviews, or, you know, is that something that you guys have seen or do, or talk to us about how you guys are getting the pulse of your team?
So we actually provide this service, stay interviews, exit interviews, things like that to our clients. And we've seen a massive uptake or a massive uptick in the use of these because people are, you know, they're scratching their head on like, why is my turnover twice what the industry average is, or twice what it was 2 years ago or something like that. So I think the more authentic information you can get from your employee base, assuming you authentically care about these things and it's not just sort of a money-driven thing. I mean, I guess there's some, you know, it's not like money's like an evil thing, but if you actually care about it, I think the more you can get the pulse of the, you know, the employee base or whatever, get good get good insights into, you know, why people are staying, what they care about, what some early kind of canaries in the coal mine are, so you can, you know, curtail an issue before it really starts to pop off and become systemic. I think they're an absolute best practice. And there's a bunch of different options for, you know, how you utilize those. I think though, stay interviews without exit interviews, you're kind of missing one of the legs on the stool, because the thing that prevents people from being authentic and like actually sharing information is that fear of retaliation, which is sort of uniquely removed on that exit interview piece. So it's just like another flavor of that same dish, but I'm a huge proponent of you know, all those kinds of things.
Yeah, I think the stay interview is an interesting concept. I do prefer more frequent touch points and the one-on-one settings with team members. I realize in large organizations that's harder to happen, but I feel like when you have these more frequent touch points, like I'm not a fan of the quarterly review or the annual review. I feel like you need to address issues right when they happen. So when you're doing that and you're having these radically candid conversations, you're uncovering issues way sooner and earlier. I mean, I've been told things that have completely shifted our entire organization, and I've restructured it based on that because my team felt comfortable enough to tell me what was going on. So I like to think that when you have that authentic, open communication, you don't necessarily need to have stay interviews.
Yeah. And I would agree. I would agree with both what Jeni and Nick both have said on that topic. I am definitely a proponent of using surveys. I've seen so many companies over the last several years that have been really, they made a lot of decisions just based on their gut feel or based on subjectivity rather than on actual data. And so there's some really good platforms and some surveys that are out there that you can provide to your employees, where they're giving you constant feedback and constant visibility into what's really going on in their lives and what's important to them, whether it's, maybe it's financial issues or financial wellness, maybe it's mental health issues. I mean, there's just a whole host of different areas that are impacting our employees. And so to be able to have some visibility into that helps us be able to be better leaders and better managers. And so, and I'm also, to Jeni's point, I'm definitely a fan of the continuous conversations with our employees rather than an annual review, because so much of that is based off of subjectivity as well. So I just think that there's, as somebody told me a couple months ago, I can hardly wait for the old days to come back. I can hardly wait till the norms kind of come back into our life. And the reality is, what used to be our norm is not coming back. So we have a great opportunity and a gold nugget here in front of us right now to really be able to recreate what we want our companies to be, what we want our culture to be, what we want our families to be, and our society to be. So I'm just saying, let's try to build something back better today than what we had 2 years ago.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
With what Chuck said, as far as the feedback and the surveys, I just want to add, it's also extremely important because so many of our organizations that we work in will do the surveys and do the interviews and ask questions, but they don't act on it. And so
all right.
Get all this feedback and then you don't do anything, and it's such a slap in the face, and it shows either employees, well, they don't care, so why should I give them more feedback? They're not going to do anything about it, so why should I say anything? So act on it once you ask.
I mean, there's 4 reasons why people don't speak up about things, right? So we have a business that does a bunch of speak up solutions and stuff like that. It's a fear of retaliation. It's because they don't think anyone cares. They don't think anything is going to be done about it. And then the small one, which isn't really that big of a factor, is they don't know how to do it. So these are the big 3 to deal with. So, and here's some great statistics for you. This organization called the Ethics and Compliance Initiative puts out a survey every few years about like the state of workplace. And you won't even believe this number, but I'm going to give it to you anyways. 79% of people who spoke up and gave feedback to their organization in 2020 experienced some kind of retaliation, explicit or implicit. So
wow,
cut that in 4, let's say you're 75% better than that. That's still 1 in 4 people in your organization that are experiencing retaliation. How much retaliation is acceptable to you? I mean, most people would say 0. So it's a great opportunity to sort of take a head, to hit that head on and say, hey, we want to, we think we might have a retaliation issue. Let's start having some conversations about that. And then to Jeni's point, what starts to come out of that stuff, you have to communicate back to folks. It has to be a conversation. The worst thing you can do is convey that any of my comments, any of my feedback is like dropping, a comment in a comment box that just empties over a fire in a barrel. You know what I'm saying? Like, you have to do something with it, because that will spread very quickly. It's like, don't even worry. Don't even bother. They're not going to do anything. I spoke up one time and, it was a slap in the face, to Jeni's point. So, and back to Chuck's point, it's such a massive opportunity to get right now. And you're going to see companies who get it right, who authentically pursue these things and communicate the difficulty of it and communicate that, effort to try to close that gap. The ones who do that are going to end up they're going to end up with higher employee engagement, lower employee turnover, and a lot of those other positive externalities that are hard to point to on a simple machine basis, but that can really separate you in the marketplace.
Yeah, you guys nailed it in that. It's just like the core values on a wall versus that are in your heart, that you actually hire and fire based on, that you're actually willing to fire somebody that's got 60% of your business tied up in it because they are not living it. When it costs you something, that's all of a sudden when you've crossed the line from preference into conviction, and people are watching, but one thing that I would say is, and without naming names, so we use this thing called Standout 2.0, and it has a pulse of it every week, like, on a scale of strongly agree to strongly disagree. So 5 radio buttons. Did you, provide value this week? Strongly agree, strongly disagree. In this week, I was able to use my strengths at work, strongly agree down to strongly disagree. And then, these are the things I loved doing. These are the things I loathed doing. These are my priorities. And do I need any help? And did I get any sort of feedback from my supervisor? Is there anything that I need from my supervisor? Well, you're not going to get that kind of stuff on a biannual or annual performance review. Never.
Right.
And I've had things that were mentioned in the comments from some of the people that I do their Standout 2.0s, where, life was just difficult with the kids, and I wouldn't have known about that. My kids are grown, so I'm like, oh, wow, can I take this off of you? And recently I had one where it was like, you kind of triggered me a little bit, because I did this kind of last minute dump and run where I was racing into a meeting. I'm like, hey, can you do this? And it was completely my fault, she would have never, ever told anybody, she would never brought this up to me in a performance review. I'm like, oh man, you're absolutely right. I thought about it last minute, but it was my fault. Well, those kind of moments and interactions actually strengthen the relationship.
Yes.
They strengthen them. And that's why again, there's nothing in it for us. It's not that expensive of a thing, and it's tied to, so Marcus Buckingham, the guy that was one of the founders of StrengthsFinder, he started another thing after they sold it to Gallup. And he started this thing called Standout 2.0. So it's worth looking into. So another question that came in that I thought this is really good too. And since Chuck and I are the oldest ones on here, this applies to us. Chuck, you said something about they're younger. I'm like, yeah, everybody's younger than me. It seems like anymore. Is ageism in the United States work environment a factor in our recovery and future sustainment? It appears that many European and Asian economies have retirement at a much earlier age. Do we think that U.S. needs to promote opportunities for older workers? Is it a competitive advantage? Great question, Bruce. Thanks for weighing in on that. Anybody want to take that one?
I mean, I think it's an absolute factor. If you talk to anyone who's subject to ageism, they'll definitely talk about it being a factor. And I guess, there's some, possibility that it's just a self-fulfilling prophecy, and they're bringing that energy, and they're getting the outcome that they're fearful of. I don't really think that's the strong force. I think the strong force is that. People have a bias to hire younger folks. They're cheaper, they're better at technology. These are all the stereotypes. To the next piece of the question, is it a competitive advantage? I think it can be. I mean, it's kind of bizarre that we spend all this time talking about diversity, and it's like the ageism is sort of left out of the equation. In our organization, we have people of all kinds of ages, and there's a lot of intergenerational cross-pollination that I think you can get a lot of magic from. So it can be a competitive advantage. But again, I think it comes down to how you interact with folks and how you create those opportunities. And I think on the other side of the fence, I think the older folks need to make sure that they're staying kind of up on everything and being able to convey that value should they have to try to find a new job, and have some good talk tracks around how incorporating them, how are you going to overcome that sort of ageist bias that is probably out there? You have to kind of have some strategies for that, I think.
Totally agree with what Nick said. I think it's the technology. I mean, my dad's 76 and he still makes YouTube videos every Sunday. Doesn't seem like age, but I think, and I've, during the hiring chat, I don't look at age, gender, race, anything. And then you go, okay, well, I look at the skill set for the job at hand. And if that skill set matches, that should be the measuring stick.
Chuck, you got anything to add to that?
I just think that it is, there's no question that ageism is very prevalent in the workforce, and particularly in the times that we're in right now. And I think that, when you look at, we have a lot of, the ones that are being impacted, they have a lot of experience. They probably have a lot of knowledge and expertise in a specific area. It's all about learning how to use that to your advantage, where you can actually be an asset to a company. And even if it's to, there's some great companies here in Charlotte right now that have a tendency to be, the age there is much younger. And I'm still seeing people that are really becoming a very big asset to those organizations. So to Nick's point, he's got people of all ages in his company. I am kudos to you for having that, for recognizing that. I just think we all have something of value that we can bring to our company.
All right, everybody. Well, we have hit kind of the bewitching hour. It is 9:31, so we've gone a minute over. I know Nick's got a hard stop.
Yeah, I got to run. Thank you, guys.
So thank you, everybody. If anybody was late getting onto this, we will post it on the BGW CPA YouTube channel later on today, and I will do a social media post with that link as well once it gets back up here. But thank you so much, Chuck. Thank you so much, Jeni. Thanks to Alissa, who's now keeping the wheels on for Patty and Amy at AccruePartners, and for Nick. Appreciate all of you guys. Thanks for taking time to join us. Gosh, we had 58 people join us today.
Thanks,
So
y'all.
y'all have a wonderful day and enjoy this beautiful weather.
Thank you.
Bye.
See ya. Bye-bye.